All right, this is my final project, Cognitive Dissonance, a Deceptive Discomfort for Social Psychology. Cognitive dissonance, in essence, is a mental discomfort where we experience two or more contradictory beliefs, values, or actions, right? We see it a lot when somebody says they believe in one thing or that they do one thing, and yet we see them act a different way. It's easy to see in hypocritical behavior that we may not see on an everyday basis, but it's out there. Common causes include, going against your personal beliefs, as we just mentioned, justifying poor decisions after the fact, and the introduction of new information which can change your existing beliefs already, or that you may already have, right? So we see this a lot where, we hear something different about a news figure that we may highly regard, a political figure we may highly regard. I think sports games are a perfect example of this, where the media tends to overblow, right? Like in basketball playoffs, after game one, we tend to overblow it in general. Things like that are common causes that can cause dissonance. Visible signs, seeing somebody unsettled, seeing them show guilt or remorse. I think the guilt is the easiest one to see. Some basic examples, and also attempting to justifying actions, right? I think that's a big one. Basic examples include, smoking when one knows it's not healthy, cigarettes are not, proclaiming to love the environment or animals but still eating meat. Another one I can think of off the top of my head is, maybe going to the gym and proclaiming you're, so great about health, but yeah, you eat poorly. Anything with contradiction, right, is the main idea here, and that's what we're going for. My first research study had to do with a personal belief, had to do with teenagers and adolescents that had a personal belief that substance abuse is wrong. Now, the ones that had this belief actually showed the greatest effects of staying abstinent. However, on a separate note, peer acceptance of the drug increased as they got older, as well as peer pressure, and this is how we see that those can play a factor in dissonance as well. The main thing to take away from this one is that personal beliefs that drug abuse is wrong led to not only higher values in general, but kept them from using drugs in the first place, hence the abstinence. It demonstrated how much of a role self-beliefs can have in motivating one's behavior. Second study was a little different and a little older, but I think it still had something very valuable to provide for my project. It was a behaviorally oriented treatment design, and there were 50 participants. So 27 of them, which were also, they're addicts, not just participants, stayed in a residential treatment program that offered detoxification, things of that nature, psychotherapy. Out of those 27, 22 of them remained drug-free altogether. It's a pretty high percentage rate out of the 27. 12 of them for 30 months, 10 for 18 months. This showed that those who stayed in the program were most likely to stay sober, helping them align, right, more with their belief system. That was the idea here. And we see how the behavior approach had a positive effect as well. This next study is probably my favorite one, and I think provides the most what I'm getting at with dissonance. So it deals with health professionals, and 30 of them were placed in an inpatient unit. It's a naturalistic observational study, but still reliable and valid. More than half of them report cognitive conflicts and also reported higher rates of anxiety and burnout, as opposed to health professionals without these conflicts. Because of this, findings suggested that these health professionals that dealt with anxiety and burnout more also experienced more distress and therefore were more susceptible and partook in substance abuse as well. And the idea here, they're health professionals, and they work in the health field. They know using drugs is wrong, yet because they dealt with anxiety and burnout more, they partook in something they didn't exactly believe in. That was the main idea here. My fourth study had to do with cognitive distortions and looking at partners within relationships, right? Intimate partner violence, things of that nature. The distortion specifically, negative self-views, negative world views, things of that nature. 31% of these individuals reported child maltreatment, 54% reported alcohol and drug-related problems. There were different rates of dating violence victimization. However, most still experienced verbal abuse. What these findings showed is that those who dealt with alcohol and drug-related problems more were more likely to be violent with each other, and there was an interactive effect between the dating violence and cognitive distortion as well, hence the negative self-views and worldviews that I mentioned just prior. Overall, those that had the greater and more difficult cognitive distortions to deal with had higher ratings and chances of being violent with their partner and also using drugs at the same time. So this is where we see, again, the cognitive distortion is coming into play. My final study was very big with 7 total experiments. However, it specifically explored cognitive dissonance theory, so it was a must-have. Here, it explored the role of acceptance in post-choice rationalization. So again, justifying choices after the fact, after you've already done something you don't believe in, justifying them. That's what this one got at. Again, there were 7 experiments, so I didn't get all of them or results from every single one. However, altogether, they all showed that results from individual attitudes and preferences provided consistent evidence that they accepted their choices after the fact. Overall, when people accepted these outcomes, they were more likely to rationalize them, whether there was the wrong decision or not, right? So this one doesn't exactly explore any specific disorder, but we see how people are likely to justify using their actions or justify their actions after the fact, even though what they decided to do maybe didn't exactly align with their belief system or wasn't right in the first place. So all in all, the first study showed that self-belief plays a huge role. The second study showed that cognitive approaches can have a significant impact, right? Those who stayed in the program stayed sober longer. The third one ties to cognitive dissonance, very well, because health professionals know better. The fourth study concluded that certain aspects of our lives, such as relationships, can be damaged by substance abuse, and how cognitive distortions make people more susceptible to things like substance abuse. Lastly, the last study displayed how people are willing to rationalize their choices, no matter how bad it may have been. And we see this when people start using substances and justifying actions after the fact, even when it's wrong. So overall, there are both positive and negative effects of cognitive dissonance. It can motivate behavior change, right, causing someone to quit smoking, or enable cognitive rationalization, denying the danger of smoking. It's largely at work when we see people partake in things they don't believe in, as I said, in hypocrisy, things like that. Internal conflict is also a big factor here. Self-perception is huge, right? I know in my experience, if one doesn't want to believe that they're an addict, this can really affect their thinking processes and how they'll view themselves in the future, and again, justify their usage. My proposal for change, it takes place, or there are 3 main categories here where we can use modification techniques such as cognitive behavioral therapies to challenge beliefs, identifying dissonance itself, right, and see if we can make these actions line up better with our beliefs. We can alter views, right, having peer accountability encouraging small commitments, like maybe staying a week or two sober, little wins, things like that, I think can help very, very well. Self-journaling can also be good. Keeping tabs of what you're doing, right? And holding yourself accountable. Having extra social support's always good. And from a medical standpoint, there are dissonance-based intervention systems. Again, anything here I think can help people combat their substance abuse. And yeah, these are my references. I went 30 seconds longer than I wanted, but this was it. Thanks.